Hey there, Susan here. Before we get started, I just wanted to tell you about a free workshop that we're hosting here at Nutrition Academy this month. Join myself, registered dietitian Susan Watson and Andrea Hardy to learn about the common myths and mistakes when using the Instant Pot. Is the Instant Pot worth all the hype? Are you still struggling to figure out how to use your Instant Pot for full meal prep success? Well, if so, join us as we walk you through all the common misconceptions of the Instant Pot and how to use it for the full meal prep potential. You can register using the link in the show notes. If you're listening to this podcast after our workshop, you can access the replay using the same link. Just look below for the webinar registration link. Hope to see you there.
You're listening to the Get Meal Prep Show, a podcast about meal planning strategies, improving your nutrition, and getting dinner on the table. You know that this is the podcast for you if you've ever thought, oh no, it's 3 o'clock and I have no idea what's for dinner. We dive deep into meal planning methods and meal planning strategies that help you prepare healthy home-cooked meals that don't leave you feeling like a slave in the kitchen. I'm your host, Susan Watson, registered dietitian, lifestyle nutrition coach, and meal planning strategist for the online course, Get Meal Prepped. My co-host, Andrea Hardy, is a registered dietitian and she helps people improve their relationship with food. Together, we have formed the Get Meal Prepped method that helps people improve their eating habits by cooking real food and not relying on convenience food products. Aside from our online course, you can work with us via our one-on-one coaching package services. You can find links to our packages in the show notes below this recording. We're so happy to have you here today and share this episode with you. If you find this episode helpful in your journey to become healthier, we would love to hear from you too. So please let us know how your meal planning is going by leaving a review on iTunes, subscribing to our channel on YouTube, or sharing this episode with friends or coworkers, or maybe even family. It's really easy to leave a review. You just leave a review right from your podcast app. Simply search the Get Meal Prep Show, click reviews, and then write a review. We would love to hear from you.
So in today's episode, Andrea and I are going to be talking about sugar and all the different things that you can do to reduce sugar in your recipe or in your baking. This is part of our recipe makeover series and how you can make your recipes healthier. And sugar is just one ingredient that we like to go after. We have a wonderful guide that you can download below in the show notes, and it's called Recipe Makeover, How to Make Your Recipes Healthier. And it's got all the information that we've been talking about in this series. So ingredients like fat and sugar, we've already covered, and you can get all the different tips in a 10-page guide that you can download and use for all of your baking. So just take a look below in the show notes and you'll see it and you can download it, and we'll get started now.
Hi there, and welcome back to our show. As we mentioned in episode number 3, we have the rules to recipe makeovers, and sometimes swapping out too much of a good thing can damage the overall enjoyment of a recipe or a food item. So honestly, don't be afraid to cut back on the sugar in your recipes, but you don't have to cut it all out. So you can start simply with a 10% reduction, so something like 5 teaspoons scooped out of 1 cup of sugar, and if you like the results in the recipe, move on to a little bit more the next time. And the key is to really think about reducing, but not necessarily cutting it all out, because sugar has a lot of different properties when it comes to baking and cooking, and if you cut them all out, you'll lose the quality, the texture, and even how long the shelf life of whatever you're cooking or baking. So let's talk a little bit about ways to reduce sugar. So things that we're going to talk about when it comes to sugar is white sugar, brown sugar, icing sugar, corn syrup, honey, maple syrup, molasses. All of these are forms of sugar and have very little calorie or nutrient differences. They provide sweetness and calories, but very few nutrients. Consuming too much sugar in your day-to-day eating can contribute in too many calories for your health and can raise blood sugar levels quickly in people with diabetes. So learning about ways to reduce sugar in your recipes can help you consume less, but still enjoy some of the sweeter things in life. So here are some tips to reduce sugar in your recipes. When a recipe calls for the sugars, like white sugar, brown sugar, or icing sugar, especially in baked cookies, squares, cakes, brownies, breads, or desserts, what you can do is try to reduce the sugar by 1/4 or 1/3. Simply just don't add it. Now, you have to remember things like delicate cakes or candy making, you can't do it. These recipes are exact science and will likely fail if you cut back on the sugar. The key with those recipes and food items is to enjoy them as a once in a while treat. So if a recipe calls for sugar and you have to cut it back a little bit, you can also use extracts like vanilla, almond, maple extract, and this will add a little bit of extra sweetness to your recipe, or you can use sweet spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, or ginger to help with the flavor. So one of the areas that I do this is with steamed milk or lattes. So sometimes in the evening I just don't feel like having tea, and I've had my wine the day before, so I like to switch it up and have a steamed milk latte. And the recipe that I had downloaded and used before, it called for 3 tablespoons of sugar, and sure, it tasted great, but that's a lot of sugar at the end of the day. So I cut back the sugar by about 2 tablespoons, and now I just add a teaspoon of sugar, and then I use vanilla extract to bump up the flavor. So that's one way that you can do it. Andrea, have you ever done that before?
Yes, for sure. I oftentimes find in dishes, I just cut back slowly over time, and same thing. I do tea lattes, and I'm about the same, a teaspoon of sugar. Otherwise, it's excessive.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to move on to some other things that have added sugar in them. So when it comes to fruit packed in syrup, so when you're at the grocery store, they have the fruit packed in heavy syrup, light syrup, or fruit juice or water. And so when you're cooking or even feeding it to your family, choosing fruits that are packed in their juices or their water is a really great way to reduce the amount of sugar. So I'm thinking sometimes I use like canned peaches in recipes. Choosing them packed in their own fruit juices is a really great way to reduce the total amount of sugar we're consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys use canned fruit at your house, Susan?
Yeah, I get just the small little containers. They come in a 4 or 5 pack, and they're packed in their own juices. It's sometimes hard to find the ones that are packed in water, but at least the ones that say no sugar added or packed in their own juices are the ones that I get my kids. The other thing too is if you can't find them, instead of buying the large cans, you can go ahead and buy the smaller packages, and you're essentially reducing by having a smaller portion.
Absolutely. So that portion piece, if you still really enjoy that flavor, is key. So moving on to syrups. So we're thinking like pancake syrups and waffle syrups. One of my family favorites is to actually make a pureed fruit syrup. So like a coulis or a compote or however you say it. You can use pureed fruits such as unsweetened applesauce, sugar-free syrups, or making a fruit coulis. So I'll just take raspberries in a pot. I'll add a little bit of water. So I'll take them frozen from my freezer, raspberries in a pot, and just kind of let them stew in their own juices, kind of caramelize. And then it makes a great topping for waffles, pancakes. I use it in my baked oatmeals, all that sort of stuff to add that sweetness from fruit rather than table sugar, white sugar, or syrups.
I love that tip. That's great.
It's such a great tip. And nobody complains because it's delicious and it's brightly colored and it adds a lot of flavor to recipes. So let's talk artificial sweeteners. We get a ton of questions about these. When it comes to baking, artificial sweeteners really do have limited use because they often can't withstand high temperatures. As well, sugar is very important for the browning reaction in baked goods. So if you cook with artificial sweeteners, you'll notice your baked goods never really browned, which is disappointing. You don't get that nice, crusty, caramelized outside, which is so important for enjoyability. Personally, that is where I would leave it. I don't really enjoy artificial sweeteners because of their taste, and I would just way rather have a smaller amount of the actual sugar version than, making something that doesn't really taste good or isn't pleasing to my palate. Do you feel the same, Susan?
I do. I'm definitely, if somebody is used to having artificial sweeteners and enjoys having them. I'm not going to tell them to stop because it's bad for your health. But if you think you're going to take a recipe and go out and start buying artificial sweeteners to swap it out to make it healthier, I'm not going to really say that's a great idea either. I would rather just have a smaller amount of the real thing and, you know, break it down a little bit more, or have it as a once in a while food item than to swap out the sugar for it. And I think too, you know, if you're expecting a certain taste and expecting a certain flavor and you use artificial sweeteners, the enjoyment is going to be a lot less. And then you just want to have additionally 2 or 3 just to finally get that enjoyment of what you were wanting, if it's, say, a cookie. And I know people who have, you know, used artificial sweeteners and have baked up a big batch, and they're like, oh, well, now I can have 3 or 4 instead of just 1. And I think it's better to have a little bit more self-control and try to eat that one cookie that's made with regular sugar mindfully and enjoy it. And I think the satisfaction would be a lot higher.
Totally agree there, for sure.
So, Andrea, you told me about something that I've never heard about, which I feel a little conflicted about that because I try to stay on top of all this stuff and it just seems to be so much. But there's a product out there called Sugar 2.0. Where do you get it? Where did you hear about it? And why is it amazing?
Yeah, so they reached out to me actually, and the reason I had come across them is because I work in gut health, and their products have prebiotics, which feed good bacteria, and probiotics, which are good bacteria. And so they asked if they could send me a sample, and I was like, okay, sure, like a sugar replacement. You know, I thought perhaps it would be similar to an artificial sweetener. However, what they've done is they've taken half regular sugar and half inulin, which is soluble fiber, so it dissolves in water. And they've made it into like a crystallized granulated sugar, like white sugar. And so per teaspoon, you get half of the calories of regular sugar, and you get fiber, and you get probiotics. Awesome. And so I thought this was too good to be true. I'm like, okay, like what is this going to taste like? What is this going to look like? But I baked with it. Because it has real sugar in it, it still caramelizes. And so it's similar to kind of cutting back on sugar when you take out a quarter or a third. However, volume-wise, you get the same volume because of the fiber. So I'm really liking it, and I'm actually adding it to, I make chai tea lattes. So I'll add a spoonful to my chai tea latte. I'm getting some prebiotics, some probiotics, and I'm cutting back on the sugar. So it's a great way to enjoy it as a nice treat.
Okay, so like it's not at the stores that I shop at.
Right. So you have to get it online.
Okay.
At this point, you can order it through Amazon, or I think their Sugar 2.0 website, but I believe that might direct you to Amazon.
How do we become sales reps for it? That sounds awesome.
I know, but they're so good, and they were kind enough to send me some samples. So, yeah, awesome. I'm by no means paid by them, but I do really love their products. So,
are they Canadian or US based?
I believe they're Canadian based. Don't quote me on that. It's either Toronto or Seattle. I can't remember. But they were super kind and sent me some really great samples and sent me some baked goods too. So they sent me amazing cookies. I'm not a baker, so it was nice to have somebody make cookies for me.
Okay, well, that's on my list to investigate, Sugar 2.0. So that sounds good. Now, what happens if, you know, we're talking about reducing sugar? What if you just have a really bad sweet tooth and you can't kick the sugar habit? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so when it comes to having a sweet tooth, I ultimately say, you know, you got to weigh out the pros and cons of when you have it. So 80% of the time, you know, we want to be choosing healthy foods, and 20% of the time we allow for these sweet things. And so ultimately I get people to ask, you know, is it worth my 20%? And so, you know, perhaps the stale donuts in the break room that sit there that are calling your name aren't, but maybe, you know, a cookie recipe that runs in your family that you guys have made is totally worth that added sugar. So weighing it out and trying to figure out what is really worth it for you, enjoying those foods in moderation and actually enjoying them. So sitting down and making sure you get pleasure from eating them, because that's why we eat them. So for me, ultimately, it comes down to moderation, building a healthier food relationship. So not feeling like I can't eat this and then eating all of them in one sitting because it's your last chance. Just including it here and there when it's really worth it for you, when you feel like it, and of course, making sure you fuel your body well otherwise.
Absolutely. That's exactly how I feel, and that's what we practice. So I have a quote for you from a doctor called Dr. Yanni Friedhoff, and he says, when it comes to enjoying treat foods that are, maybe not so healthy for you, what is the least amount that you need to enjoy your life? So, some days that is maybe 2 or 3 cookies, and we want to give you permission that that's okay. And some days maybe it's like, oh, I have these cookies here and I just don't feel like it. And that's okay too. If we get all caught up with an all or nothing attitude and want to go ahead and just consume it all, then, we're having definitely some issues with our relationship with food. So, when we talk about our recipes, you want to be mindful of the recipes that you make. And if you want to reduce the sugar in them, go ahead and do that. And maybe some days you don't want to, and that's okay too. You want to check in with yourself and say, do I need all of that sugar-filled item today? And some days it might be yes, and some days it might be no. And you just want to make sure that you're not having that all or nothing attitude. And remember that partial control of, your eating is better than no control at all. So those are my mantras for today. And we'll go into the meal prep wins for this week because I don't have any fails. I feel really good. And so my meal prep win for you that I wanted to share is that I like to have smoothies in the morning. I'm not promoting that smoothies are the ultimate breakfast solution, but I like to have smoothies. They're quick and easy and fast. And what I find really time consuming about making smoothies is I like to have it really balanced. So I have my berries, I have my yogurt, I'll have oatmeal in it as well as some fiber. And to get all of the ingredients put together, sometimes I'm like, oh, that's, takes too much time. So on the weekend, I got some containers and I put all of the ingredients for 5 different smoothies into Tupperware containers and put them in the freezer so that every morning this week I've been able to just dump it into my blender and add a little bit of almond milk and I'm on my way. So that's my win. I, promote doing that meal prep if you have a chance, whatever your breakfast idea is, think in advance and do some prep so that you can make sure you're having breakfast every day. So that's all that we have for today. Make sure that you get your recipe makeover guide below in the show notes and stay tuned for next episode on recipe makeovers. We're going to be talking about ways to reduce sodium in your recipes. So see you then.